Welcome, students. As we continue to look at the executive branch, we're going to look at federal bureaucracy. So what is bureaucracy? Bureaucracy is large, complex administrative structure that handles the everyday business of an organization. Our school has a bureaucracy that has departmental governments that each department divvies up the work and they report to a head. And so as much as there are problems with bureaucracy, disjointed and a lot of red tape that you have to go through, bureaucracy is very important for a structure of a business. Three features of a bureaucracy. You have the hierarchical authority. So at the top you have the executive, and at the bottom you have those who answer. And so answers go up. Authority is a chain of command. You have job specialization, people that are specialized at their certain jobs at different various levels. And then you also have formalized rules. And so bureaucracy is a formalized structure with specialization and authority that exists. And so as much as we don't like the idea of bureaucracy because it takes away from freedom, it does provide a sense of efficiency. So looking at bureaucratic organization. Not specified in the Constitution, so nowhere in the Constitution does it say that there needs to be bureaucracy. Large size and expanding responsibilities have shaped its organization. Requires specialization agencies for everything. And so as an organization starts to grow, it has more bureaucracy. The U.S. government, federal government, used to be a lot smaller, so there's less bureaucracy. But as time goes on, the bureaucracy has changed. There used to be only 5 cabinet positions in the original presidency, but now there are 14 cabinet positions. Gives a certain degree of independence as well. There's a certain level of freedom within each department, however, they're all answering to the top. Main parts of federal bureaucracy. Well, within the White House office, you have the executive office of the president. You have 15 executive departments, cabinet members. You have independent agencies, plus all the civil service workers that actually carry out its functions. So you have different civil service is government jobs. So you have the different government jobs that work and carry out the positions of the federal bureaucracy, the different functions. White House office. The West Wing, you have loyal to the president, do not need confirmation by the Senate. Acts as a filter of information. Important positions, you have the vice president, you have the chief of staff, press secretary. As you see right here, press secretary, formerly to Donald Trump, that is kind of the face of the president and answers different questions to the press. Executive Office of the President, the EOP, provides the president with the support and services he needs in order to govern effectively. Important offices would be the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, the Council of Economic Advisors, CEA, the National Security Council, NSC, and top officials require Senate approval. So in order to be a top official in these agencies, you do need the Senate's approval. So we have the important offices there. Executive departments, cabinet ones, handle major areas of concern for the federal government. There are 15 total departments. Seems like every few years there's a new cabinet position added. Original, there were 3: State, Treasury, and Department of War. The newest is Homeland Security. Leadership, headed by secretaries, followed by deputy and undersecretaries. 2 secretary roles, run their department and advise the president. That's a really important part right there, to understand that these secretaries, they run their own specific department, whether it's urban and development, city development, or whether it's education, and they're also advising the president. And sometimes that does come in conflict with the first role. So the cabinet department, we have other ones that exist as well. You don't need to write all these down, but the Department of State was original, Department of Treasury was original, Department of War was original. But then we also have Justice, the Interior, Agriculture, Commerce, Labor, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, Transportation, Energy, Education, Veterans Affairs, and the newest is Department of Homeland Security. You don't need to write all those down, but those are all the different department cabinet positions. Tons of bureaucracy. 3 types of independent agencies. We have independent executive agencies created outside the departments for narrow purpose. Example would be NASA. You also have independent regulatory commissions, largely outside the reach of the government control and responsible for regulating the economy and large industries. So you have those independent regulatory commissions that regulate and make sure that things are fair within the economy. Example of that might be heads to serve for fixed term may not be removed, largely independent, protected from partisan pressure. Then you also have government cooperation or corporations, government corporations. They carry out certain business-like activities, government-owned. So you actually do have certain things like Amtrak would be an example, where it is a business, but it's owned by the government. So kind of like a socialized type endeavor there. Government corporations. You also have some independent agencies. Head is appointed by the president. Regulatory heads serve for set terms. Reasons they exist outside departments: they don't fit well within any department. Protection from partisan, which means political, and pressure politics. Unique and sensitive nature to their purpose. So we do have some independent agencies that exist as well, but they do exist outside of the departments. Critics of bureaucracy. There's red tape, too many regulations and hoops to jump through. So there is a criticism to this bureaucracy. Duplication of responsibilities. So there's certain bureaucracies that kind of do the same thing and reduplicate the process, costing more money and more resources. Ineffective, difficult to fire bureaucrats, and too large. So the government has grown over the years to be kind of this huge monster that we, the people, tend to criticize. Even though there's independent freedom within the bureaucracy itself for those bureaucracies to work, there is a lot of red tape and too many regulations and hoops to jump through. Checks on power of the bureaucracy. So the executive appoints agencies and department heads, issues executive orders. The judiciary, however, judicial judges, they declare actions unconstitutional. So if there's an unconstitutional action, they can have a check on that power. And then lastly, the legislative, they pass legislations altering activities of bureaucracy. They add details to it. They refuse to appropriate funds. they can have the power of the purse, so to speak. So if the president wants to use money for something, it's really the Congress who has the purse, the money, so to speak, to fund those. And so think of the Congress as maybe the sole breadwinner of the family, who's coming in with the income. But then you have the other parent, who is trying to spend the money. In a traditional 1950s society, that would have been the man was the breadwinner, and the female spent the money through groceries and such. And so the purse strings would be the head of the house that's um, generating the revenue. But then you have the female, so to speak, in a traditional 1950s example that would be buying things. Investigate bureaucracy activities, hearings, so they can hold hearings on certain bureaucracy. Influence presidential appointments, they can advise and consent to those appointments. They may create or disband agencies. So within bureaucracy, you do have this check on power, so to speak, whether it's the executive check or the judicial check or the legislative check. But that's generally the scope of bureaucracy within the federal government. Iron triangles and issue networks. Iron triangles, you don't need to write this down, but you have interest groups, executive agencies, and congressional committees. Example would be AARP, Social Security Administration, and the Committee on Aging Benefits, limiting those players. As you have right here, you have interest groups that work within the bureaucracy there. Issues networks, network of public officials, lobbyists, mass media, think tanks, those who promote particular issues, more for public benefit, wide-ranging constituency. You don't need to write that down either. How bureaucracy works, Congress sets general guidelines, but allows agencies to make policy decisions. Discretionary authority, kind of the why. 1946 Administrative Procedures Act must make rule changes public and allow for comments. Federal Register would be an example. Often duplicates responsibilities, keeps government from becoming all powerful, but also creates greater confusion and waste. You don't need to write that down either. As you see right here, Federal Register. Competitive civil service, spoils system to merit system. The Pendleton Act would get away from those issues. You would also have the Hatch Act of 1939 that would also curve some of those problems within the bureaucracy. And that's the end of our notes.